stepped down, with reports of many more. Failing to report allegations of child sexual abuse could become a criminal offence. The recommendation was included in the findings of a 7-year-long inquiry into child abuse in England and Wales. And a man has been charged with the murder of a 3-week-old boy in Birmingham. The baby died in Spark Hill on Tuesday. 29-year-old Qadis Mohammed also faces charges of assault and wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. LBC weather: cloudy with heavy spells of rain across much of Scotland and northern and eastern England. Brighter over Northern Ireland, Wales and southwest England, with a high of 18 degrees.
This is LBC.
At Laser Clinics UK, we're bringing you the future of beauty. We offer state-of-the-art laser hair removal for every skin tone and type. Ditch the razor, leave behind painful, pricey waxing, make the switch for long-lasting, smooth results. Our Big Beauty sale is on now. 50% off all laser hair removal packages. Brazilian and underarms only £24.50 per session. Go to laserclinics.co.uk for T's and C's and to book and buy online. Laser Clinics UK.
Our pledge is to put more money in the public's pocket.
What about my household bills?
Feeling that cost of living crunch? Lebara are here to help. 3 gigabytes of data, EU roaming included, and no annual price rises, all for just £5 a month. Lebara, more for less. Change or cancel anytime. Rated excellent on Trustpilot. Buy now at lebara.co.uk. Terms apply.
Life is about sharing those magical moments, and food shouldn't be any different. For over 35 years, Marouche has been perfecting this experience with their delicious food, warm hospitality and live entertainment. Authentic Lebanese cuisine made the traditional way. Marouche, your family restaurant. Book now at marouche.com.
At Lidl, we're big on British, because all our everyday range of fresh milk, butter and eggs is British. That's as British as a buttery crumpet in a builder's brew and taking forever to hang up the phone. Bye, cheers, bye then. Yep, that British. Now that's big on quality and always Lidl on price. Excludes special promotions. Subject to availability, selected stores excludes NI.
Paint your walls a shade that'll get your neighbours staring. At Wickes, get Dulux Standard 2.5 litre coloured emulsion was £20, now £15. Be house proud with Wickes. Terms apply.
Now that the holiday season is over, many timeshare owners are facing a winter of expensive upkeep. With rising inflation, now more than ever, we need to look after our money. If you own a timeshare in Spain or the Canaries and bought it after 5th of January 1999, you may have been missold. mytimeshareclaim.co.uk could help you exit your contract and receive substantial compensation. To find out more, text ASSIST to 78900. That's ASSIST to 78900 today.
Maybe your stamps are on the table next to the birthday card you forgot to send. Or in that random drawer full of pens, pennies and paper clips. Or stuck to your fridge behind a year-old to-do list and a magnet from Malaga. Or maybe, just maybe, they're neatly placed in a completely sensible spot. After the 31st of January 2023, regular stamps without a barcode will no longer be valid. So if you know where your old ones are, use them up or swap them. For more info, visit royalmail.com/barcoded stamps.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:33 is the time. Charlotte Lynch has been looking through the report, the conclusions of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, which was published moments ago. Charlotte got hold of it a little earlier, but the embargo was only lifted at 12 noon today. So it will be early impressions, Charlotte, that you can share with us.
Yes, James. Well, this is the result of a 7-year inquiry that's looked at more than 2.5 million pieces of evidence and spoken to more than 7,000 victims of abuse. And time again, with every aspect it looked at, repeated failures were exposed by adults in positions of trust who failed to report that children were being sexually abused or signs of it, whether it be in schools, in social services and care, with within the church and indeed in Westminster too. That investigation released in February 2020, which found that at times whips officers and the police had showed deference towards people of public prominence. But that has been exposed throughout this inquiry. People often turning a blind eye and covering up allegations of abuse to protect the reputations of their institutions. And the overarching recommendation of this inquiry now, of which it has made 20, but the main overarching recommendation is that it should be mandatory for people in positions of trust to report it, and it should be a criminal offence if they don't. Now, the inquiry's chair, Alexis Jay, I know you'll be speaking to her a little later on, but she said urgent action is required to protect children across England and Wales. It found many institutions have historically inadequate measures that fail to safeguard them from abuse that happened and continues to happen in schools, care homes and in religious settings. Now, the most common place they found for this dreadful abuse to occur is in the family home, but 36% of those 7,300 victims they spoke to said abuse happened somewhere else in an institution, and schools were the most frequently reported location. And actually, in this report, several examples were given from victims, which, as you can imagine, makes incredibly difficult reading. But again, as I was flicking through almost all of them that I was reading, so many said that they felt they had been let down by everyone and everything, by people who were supposed to protect them. In fact, one victim even said that he was told he was tarnishing the reputation of his Muslim religion. He shouldn't say anything. People were often ignored, not believed, or even just told to shut up, because schools, councils and other institutions wanted to protect their own reputations. Now, the government has been urged to create what they're calling a child protection authority to ensure that this is being reported, acted upon and prevented, because what they've found is there is a significant lack of leadership when it comes to this across the police, across healthcare, across schools. There's no kind of one body that brings it all together and investigates it and works to prevent it. So they want a child protection authority to be urgently set up in England and another one in Wales. And what was also a major factor of this report was the role of social media and websites. Of course, they want more to be done on that front. They want social media and web giants to take more responsibility for their role and put more screening measures in place, and also more measures for age verification checks for users. They say the online safety bill has taken too long to be enacted by the government and must be urgently progressed, and the government must urgently take action on those factors too. So I know Alexis Jay will be giving you more detail about their findings a little later in the programme, but
Thank
really
you,
this overarching recommendation, making it a criminal offence to turn a blind eye, has been done for so long.
So the end of the inquiry, but the beginning of a process of improvement that no doubt Professor Jay will be able to, as Charlotte says, tell us more about shortly. All being well. I mean, she's incredibly busy, obviously, and we move on sixpences on this programme, although at the door is opening at Downing Street, but it's just someone coming out with a bag. 38 minutes after 12 is the time. Should we talk about some other political matters that are unfolding before us, which would garner rather more attention in normal circumstances? Take your pick, Boris Johnson or Nadine Dorries?
Let's start with the Nadine Dorries story, which has just come out. This is a report from the Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee, and it relates to a documentary series broadcast on Channel 4 in 2010, Tower Block of Commons. Now, Nadine Dorries, of course, then Culture Secretary this year, and 4 other MPs participated in this documentary, which placed her on a housing estate in South Acton in West London. And she made a number of claims before the Select Committee in May of this year. She said the parents of some of the boys in that programme contacted me and came here to have lunch to tell me that the boys were in acting school. They were not really living in a flat. They were not real. They were actually actors. If you remember, there was a pharmacist I went to see who prepared food. She was also a paid actor as well. Now, Channel 4, in response to those allegations, asked Love Productions, which produced the show to investigate Nadine Dorries' claims. They couldn't find any evidence that ordinary members of the public had interactions with the Secretary of State. And now Julian Knight, who's chairman of the Select Committee back in July, asked Nadine Dorries to back up her claims, but of course saying the committee needs to ensure that those who give evidence before it do so with the intent of providing the truth as far as they know it. The ministerial code counts in committee exactly in the same manner as it does in the House of Commons, and the code is quite clear that a minister should provide information should a minister provide information that is not correct, they should, at the earliest opportunity, correct the record. However, has the record been corrected? No, it hasn't. And of course, Nadine Dorries has been subject to criticism as a result by Julian Knight, the chairman of the committee. And I should just give you his quote now.
Yeah,
we can recognise that those giving evidence will occasionally make mistakes, but it is vitally important for the integrity of parliamentary scrutiny that they are then corrected. We are disappointed that despite being provided with several opportunities to reconsider her position, the former Secretary of State failed to countenance that her recollections may have been flawed. People will be able to draw...
That's very generous. Her recollections may have been flawed.
People will be able to draw their own conclusions.
Because she's under parliamentary privilege, otherwise Channel 4 would be able to sue her, wouldn't they? As would I, of course, when she lied about me in Select Committee on several occasions, as was pointed out by the SNP MP John Nicholson.
Yes. Yeah.
I should get my own report, frankly.
People will be able to draw their own conclusions about the contrast between her claims and subsequent correspondence with the committee and Channel 4's thorough investigation. Talking of committees, would you like to know about details I've discovered this morning about the Privileges Committee into Partygate?
Oh, yes, please.
Now, do you remember when Dominic Cummings? This is a genuine question.
He gave the committee. Wore a hat.
He gave that evidence, and you basically took it live. You dedicated your whole show.
I did. Yes.
When the Privileges Committee sits in November, do you know how long it's going to be sitting for?
No.
It's going to be sitting for 4 hours a day, for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, for 3 days a week. And this is in a committee for 3 weeks.
Just to examine...
3 weeks.
Well, it's quite a big deal if a Prime Minister
Apparently there are just so many witnesses who want to come forward with detailed evidence as to whether Boris Johnson knowingly misled Parliament when he said that there were no parties.
Oh, this is big. Because why would they want to come? But they're not coming forward to back him up, are they?
So you're going to end up in this situation where the Privileges Committee, live on camera... is going to be interviewing people, probably a 10 o'clock start time, actually. Yeah. They're not like those who avoid the James O'Brien show.
No, the Select Committees don't.
They'll be taking...
So we could take some of it live every day.
If you wanted to. I don't know. You might want to. But if you wanted to. But it's the reason that this was being spoken about to me was, of course, to anybody who might, in the Conservative Party, you might think that Boris Johnson is the answer, suddenly starts work, and then you've got... 4 hours a day for 3 days a week for 3 weeks of evidence about why...
A long queue of people describing his partying.
WhatsApp messages, emails, photographs,
all
potentially
designed. So the inquiry is when he said that he hadn't been to any party, when he said there weren't any parties, and then he said, well, actually there were parties, but I didn't go to any. And then he said, well, actually there were parties and I did go to them, but I didn't realise they were parties.
To what's in Parliament.
They'll be able to pin down whether or not he has a leg to stand on.
No,
when he claimed he didn't realise he was misleading Parliament when he misled Parliament.
Yeah, because it's about knowingly misleading Parliament. So they'll be looking at evidence to support any claims that when he made the statements that he made, he actually knew the truth to be different because he's received the WhatsApp messages, the photographs, the emails and so forth.
I remember when the Daily Mail spent 10 days, was it, trying to make a big fuss about Keir Starmer's utterly blameless behaviour over curries and beers. Still watching the door.
Still watching the door.
Do you think they're waiting for Sheila? As soon as Sheila comes on air, the door will open and they'll make a flipping announcement. I never get to announce the end of Prime Ministerial. Here she is. She is Sheila Fogarty, walking like an Egyptian. Is that it? I mean,
waiting, looking at the door.
I suppose if you're just joining us, then I should tell you that the Prime Minister, Theresa May, Prime Minister Liz Truss is in a meeting with the chair of the 1922 committee. Theo Ushwood was at the lobby briefing earlier with the Prime Minister's official spokesman, who was asked two questions, among others, which were, are there any plans for the Prime Minister to meet with Graham Brady today?
That was 11:30.
11:30, yes, so just over an hour ago. What was the answer to that question?
No plans for the Prime Minister to meet Sir Graham Brady.
And also, I believe, will Liz Truss be leading the Conservatives into the next general election? To which the reply was...
I think it was the same as Anne-Marie Trevelyan when she said, I think the Prime Minister will be leading the Conservative government into the next election. Nothing is certain.
Thank you, Theo. My whole life, someone who's asked me to protect their anonymity has been totally taken over by historic abuse as a 5-year-old. I feel utterly disgusted and ashamed that this story isn't going to be in the media as much as it should be, and all because our government cannot act like grown-ups for 2 minutes. I took part in the inquiry, and I am pleased that the report has come to the conclusions that it has come to. More coverage should be given to this report, but instead the news will be taken over by adults behaving like imbeciles. I'll do my best to redress some of that in the coming days. I promise. It's 12:45.
Coming up at 1 on LBC, Sheila Fogarty.
A little dictator without a mandate, appalling, unforgivable, inexcusable. Liz Truss's annual appraisal from her colleagues enters dismissal.
Sheila Fogarty.
12:49 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the message I read out a moment ago from someone who asked to remain anonymous, expressing concern that some of the attention that should be paid to the conclusion of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse will perhaps be distracted or turned instead to the continuing shenanigans in Downing Street. I meant what I said. I'll do my level best to redress some of that balance in the coming days, weeks, even months. And I'm joined now by Professor Alexis Jay, who has chaired the inquiry. Alexis, thank you for your time. I wonder, perhaps we could begin months from now, or even a year or two from now. What changes are you most keen to see in the status quo?
Well, of course, we want to see all of our recommendations implemented as quickly as possible. And we do realise that some of them inevitably will take a little longer than others. But ideally, we want them to be implemented because we believe this is the best possible way that we can protect children better in the future.
What are I'm trying to phrase this question sensitively, but the ones that you want acted on first, the ones that are most urgent?
Well, the problem with the question is that, in a sense,
they're all urgent.
A package. Yes, I'm sorry to say that, James, but it's a package of recommendations which fit together. Now, we talked of 3 very important ones that formed the centrepiece, as I'm sure you know, which were about mandatory reporting, redress, a scheme of redress, and finally the creation of child protection authorities for England and for Wales.
You have a background in social work yourself in Scotland. How shocked were you in the course of this inquiry to discover the depth of the problems?
I was shocked at the depth and the breadth of the problems. Although, needless to say, it was not the first time I had conducted any investigations out of Scotland.
Of course. On a personal level, it must have been quite harrowing, this inquiry. It's gone on for years. It's involved testimony that, I don't know whether you know, my school was in one of the earlier reports that have already been published, yes. and I found it almost unbearable to read one small section of what you and your colleagues have been dealing with now for years.
Yes, I think it would have been very difficult for anybody who had been present in any of the settings that we investigated. However, as professionals outside that, I myself, of course, have been trained and spent my working life dealing with very complex and difficult issues around vulnerable children and adults. So certainly not immune to the impact of hearing these horrible accounts, but perhaps better prepared.
Yes. Could you explain to the uninitiated exactly what mandatory reporting entails and why it is such an important recommendation in the report?
I will try to very briefly, but just say that we would require individuals in certain specific roles to report allegations of child sexual abuse where they receive a disclosure, where they witness abuse, or where they observe indicators of abuse. Now, the categories we're talking about are anybody working in what's called regulated activity, like children's homes or playgroups or whatever, or those who are in positions of trust. Both of those include volunteers as well, but it covers those in positions of trust and the police.
And this is because of all of the instances you examined of allegations being made, people finding the courage to come forward and then being at best ignored, at worst, of course, blamed. The phrase institutions prioritised their reputations over the protection of children will resonate with anybody who's been close to these sort of crimes.
Yes, you sum it up very well. That's exactly the reason, and the evidence from the beginning and all the way through, which we considered very carefully about the question of mandatory reporting, convinced us that this was a very significant step to take in the better protection of children in the future.
It's an incredible piece of work, and I don't know if it's appropriate to say thank you for undertaking it, but I will do. Thank you for doing this.
It's very, very kind of you, and we also appreciate the focus you brought to it through your public platform.
Professor Alexis Jay, thank you, the author, as we said, of the chairwoman of the inquiry into child sexual abuse, which has today published its concluding report calling for urgent action to ensure children are better protected from sexual abuse. And regular listeners will know that my interest in this was born of discovering what had happened to some of my classmates at school, and of course many corners of the media, for reasons that I'll never understand, continue to pay a lot more attention to the false allegations of Carl Beach, described at the time by the Metropolitan Police as credible and true, but quite why anybody would not want a lot more attention paid to child sexual abuse allegations, a lot more attention paid to children finding the courage to come forward, and a lot more attention paid to allegations that are historically true and are historically solid is something that I will and continue to never understand. What is the motivation of people who don't want these allegations to be properly and fully examined in the light of day? I'll leave you to speculate about that, but some of the answers you come up with will be some of the reasons why so many of these children have been betrayed and let down over the decades, even after finding the courage to come forward. 12:55 is the time. Back to matters political. We've got 3 minutes before Sheila gets here, and the door is still closed.
Yes, but Tory Party Chairman Jake Berry has just gone into number 10. And of course, as the Tory Party Chairman, he's a key figure in terms of party management. He was formerly chairman of the Northern Research Group, which of course led the Red Wall Conservative MPs appointed to the key post as party chairman. Slightly, he at Tory conference, he found himself in slightly hot water when he suggested that people should go out and get a better paid job if they were struggling financially.
He's what's known in the trade as a charmer, I think it's fair to say. So this is, again, probably some form of negotiation underway. Liz Truss possibly taking a little while to accept that the game is up. I mean, the game is over, and now there'll be...
Or they're trying to sort a process.
That's what I mean. They'll be discussing the means under which she'll be trying to save some sort of face. She may even be trying to construct some sort of escape route, and Brady will be...
To make it orderly.
Yes, Brady will be concerned with making it as orderly and as frictionless as possible.
So, as I was saying earlier, and I was saying this in when we first spoke, James, the indication I've had, and it's difficult to you have to talk around it, but the indication I had from very senior people in Number 10 is they know the game's up. It's over.
I think we probably end the programme with that clip from Sir Charles Walker, with which we almost began it, because this was a moment, wasn't it, Theo, when you realised last night. I mean, this is the point at which bookmakers may have started paying out on bets that Liz Truss would be gone by the end of the year. Shall we have another listen to that?
To be perfectly honest, this whole affair is inexcusable. It is a pitiful reflection on the Conservative Parliamentary Party at every level. And it reflects really badly, obviously, on the government of the day. I think it's a shambles and a disgrace. I think it is utterly appalling.
So you seem quietly...
I'm livid. And, you know, I really shouldn't say this, but I hope all those people that put Liz Truss in Number 10, I hope it was worth it. I hope it was worth it for the ministerial red box. I hope it was worth it to sit round the cabinet table, because the damage they have done to our party is extraordinary.
I'm sorry, it's very difficult to convey. You look just furious about this?
I am. I've had enough. I've had enough of talentless people putting their tick in the right box, not because it's in the national interest, but because it's in their own personal interest to achieve ministerial position. Unless we get our act together and behave like grown-ups, I'm afraid many hundreds of my colleagues, perhaps 200, will be leaving at the behest of their electorate.
Gosh, BBC interview there. I think it was Ione Wells doing a really, really good job of just letting Sir Charles Walker breathe in circumstances that I am now almost bored of describing as unprecedented. I will actually leave you with something else, I think, as opposed to the words of Sir Charles Walker. I'll leave you with the columns of David Frost, 4 columns from the last few months. I'm backing Liz Truss for PM to lead the talented team that will deliver for Britain. Why Kwarteng is right and Carney is wrong. Don't give up on Truss yet, she can rebound. And finally, Liz Truss has to go if the Tory party is to have any chance of recovering. I have said it before and I will say it again. When you put these clowns into driving seats, when you allow them to infect the public space with their ignorance and their arrogance, well, we're all finding out what follows. 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 Finding out what